Myers Counseling Group podcast. We offer mental health, substance abuse, and wellness information for the community. To find out more information and to access previous podcasts and other resources, visit us at myerscounseling.com. Hello, I'd like to welcome Mike Loverde, founder and CEO of Family First Intervention. Welcome, Mike. Mike, please explain a little bit about Family First Intervention, a brief description of when you started and where you're located.
Family First Intervention originated after I struggled for several years with my own addiction issues. Having gone through 19 different treatment centers, my family kept sitting back and waiting for things to correct themselves. Nothing had seemed to ever worked, and my family had called upon an interventionist, and they had done one on me. I originally said no, accepted the help, and have been sober ever since. And the reason I had created Family First Intervention is because time and time again we're told that we have to want help or hit bottom, and there were so many things that my family did that made the difference. So that's why Family First Intervention was created. Our goal is to help every family and their loved one find peace, and it can happen through changing family systems. We are located in the Chicago area, although we are nationwide. I have interventionists throughout the U.S. We actually service the United States and sometimes in Canada. We're usually available all the time and can get to families relatively quickly. The intervention process is about 2 to 3 days, and it starts with a simple phone consultation.
Mike, what exactly is an intervention?
I think I could start off by saying what it isn't, and it is not a motivational or inspirational speech trying to get somebody to just change. An intervention is about repairing the family system that has been broken over time by the manipulative behaviors and cons, lies and deceits of the alcoholic or the addict. A lot of people think, why do we even need the intervention? My husband has just talked to him or her several times. What are you going to do different? And what an intervention exactly is about changing the platform in which the addiction exists. No addict or alcoholic in and of themselves is capable of getting high. There's almost always an enabling family system supporting it. And if we can set healthy boundaries, we can get that person to take accountability. That's what an intervention is. Many people feel, again, it's just about the inspirational or motivational speech, and it isn't. It's about changing the boundaries of the family system that's been broken.
Who is usually involved?
The members of the intervention group usually consist of the people who, of course, love the person who needs help, have been there, can be of any influence or voice of reason. The actual hardest part of the intervention is getting those people involved. Everybody has a difference of opinion. One thing to point out in people being involved is our most difficult time we have in arranging the family for the intervention is identifying the martyr of the group. And unfortunately, that's usually a husband, a wife, significant other, or romantic partner. And usually we have to be careful before engaging them in the intervention process before we get started. They're almost always a part of it, but it is very important as to when we bring that person in. So, certainly nobody that's ever gotten high or drunk with the addict or alcoholic, usually closest friends and definitely family. And of course, the people who are enabling them to continue on with their addiction.
What other areas besides drug or alcohol use could an intervention be used for?
Interventions could be used for chemical dependency addictions as well as process addictions. We do actually perform many interventions on gambling addicts, overeaters, sex addiction, and many other process addictions that we face. I think the biggest thing is that whether it's a chemical we're putting in our body or whether we're overeating, undereating, gambling, or addicted to sex, the components of the intervention are almost always the same, and that is we're looking for an escape. And the process, although different, is almost the same, and the family still enabling, making it easy, etc. A lot of times, especially with a gambling addiction, we listen to some of those stories, and outside of ingesting the alcohol or the drugs, the stories are almost identical as far as financial strain and pressure on the family. So we do primarily deal in substance abuse, but when the calls for the process addictions do come in, we handle those as well.
Where did interventions originate from? How did this all start?
Interventions actually started with Vern Johnson, who to some is considered to be the founding father or even the godfather of intervention. Mr. Johnson's model was controversial in nature, where he put most of his emphasis on pressuring and or coercing the addict or alcoholic into treatment with very little emphasis on changing the family system. Of course, over time that's changed, but because of Mr. Johnson, we are able to help people through the intervention process. And again, it's changed over the years, but the origination of the concept has been able to get people to treatment that were otherwise hopeless.
Is there more than one model people use in interventions?
Well, there are a couple different models that are available. Whether or not they're used is the question. I mean, the most popular and most effective is the systemic model, which is the focus on family systems, where we set the boundaries, change the behaviors of the enabling group that hold the addict or alcoholic to not have to be accountable. The invitational model is something that we don't use. Anytime we've tried to have an addict or an alcoholic know ahead of time that we're coming, it usually backfires. I was actually asked by a clinician at a well-known hospital what I thought of the invitational model, and I explained to him that when the sheriffs start letting people know they're on the way with arrest warrants, we'll start letting clients know we're on the way with an intervention.
How much input does a person needing help have in this? Is there a negotiation involved?
The answer is none. The addict or the alcoholic needing help has no say in where they're going and for how long. That's why the family brings in a professional. We spend countless hours in preparation with the family before the intervention and then during to make sure that we've all come up with the best solution for the person needing help. I mean, the first part of recovery is asking for help and letting go and letting people who knew better than we what type of help we need. I mean, if we let heroin addicts dictate which treatment they would need, they would all just want Suboxone. If we wanted to, let alcoholics, know what treatment they need, they would just all pick some outpatient group. Most people, when we get the call for intervention, are at a level of residential inpatient care. That's what they're going to need. So I believe that the professional being hired and the 10 sane family members are in a better position to make a decision for that chemically dependent person. So therefore, there's no negotiation. I mean, granted, it's a loving, caring process. We do catch more bees with honey than vinegar, but their input will be noted but not taken into consideration.
Mike, what's your take about being told there's no hope for the loved one until they hit bottom or they want help?
Point blank, it's ridiculous. The fact of the matter is they may have to want help and hit bottom, but every phone call I've ever had, that family is standing in the way from both of them happening. I mean, if you're a 21-year-old kid living in your parents' basement and all the bills are paid, you have keys to the car, you steal things for pawn, and there's no consequences to your actions, where's the bottom? Why would you want to change? I guess I used to believe in you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, and then I realized how ridiculous that was, because you can. You need patience, you need boundaries, and you need one drinking source. And if we can set the proper boundaries and have the proper patience, we can bring a bottom and have anybody willingly accept help at some point. To sit back and just think that an addict or an alcoholic who's got everything taken care of, or the family just simply doesn't confront it because we have to wait for a bottom or want help, is actually sad. I mean, most of the people that call us say, wow, you've given me hope. You're the first person that didn't tell me I had to wait for my son or daughter to die. Because at the end of the day, people define jails, institutions, and death as our bottom, and then they tell you that that's what you have to wait for. I don't get it, and we don't believe in that.
Why do families wait to intervene?
They think it's going to correct itself. You know, how many mothers or fathers call us and think, you know, if their son or daughter just finds that right job or meets that right man or their right woman, everything will go away, or maybe this arrest will change things. And it just never happens. And then, of course, there's fear, you know, or what are we going to do different? You know, families call me all the time, Mike, we've exhausted all options, and then I come to find out they've done nothing different to change their own behaviors. Families wait simply because it's more comfortable to not confront the situation. I mean, the sad part is families and addicts and alcoholics are identical as far as behaviors are concerned, where they're all looking for the path of least resistance. And then even more sadly enough, families become comfortable in the chaos. You know, sometimes it's more comfortable to stay with what we know than it is to walk away and face the uncertainties of the unknown. You know, families wait simply because it's comfortable, or they just feel it won't work because that's what their loved one has taught them.
Mike, starting from the first phone call, explain how a typical intervention may go.
Getting to the actual intervention itself is the easy part. Setting it up, starting with that first call, is the most difficult. It's actually 10 times harder to get the family to do the intervention than it is to get the addict or the alcoholic to accept the help. After the initial phone consultation, it's usually very difficult to get all the families to agree, but once we get to that point, it's typically a 2 to 3 day process, starting with the intervention counselor meeting with all the key players. And again, systemic model intervention means the addict or the alcoholic does not know ahead of time. We prepare. It's about a 4 to 6, sometimes even longer session of meeting with the family, going over education, enabling family systems, the letter writing, the objections of the addict, and of course, the 800-pound gorilla. What if my son or daughter or loved one says no? And we need to handle that. We need to talk about boundaries and consequences. The following day, the intervention takes place, and we don't stop until you feel that we've done everything possible to get them to accept help. And it's always comfortable to note that 90% of all addicts or alcoholics accept help and go the day of the intervention. And the 10% that say no will eventually go if the family follows all directions of the day before. Point to be made is, interventions don't fail. There's only one design flaw, and that's that you have to follow the directions of the professional.
Who is your typical caller, and how hard is it to arrange for an intervention?
Almost 95% of all calls come from a woman. Of all the interventions that we schedule, it's only when we can convince the man that this is something that has to be done. Not to make light of this theory, but men do not stop and ask for directions. They single-handedly are the majority of the reason why interventions never happen. The mother, feeling that this needs to be done is usually overridden by the man who thinks this doesn't need to be done. Men are redeemers by nature, and getting them on board is the most difficult part of the job. So I've always got mom calling during the day, presenting it to dad at night, and unfortunately, the majority of the time we never hear back until things get completely out of hand. The biggest thing with the intervention and answering that question is, if everybody were always on the same exact page, I wouldn't have a job. And unfortunately, again, it's always mom calling, and unfortunately, dad always shooting it down.
What is the ultimate goal of an intervention?
Well, certainly getting the addict or alcoholic to accept help and willingly enter treatment is probably the biggest thing we try to accomplish. But the ultimate goal is to have that family understand that regardless of the outcome, they've done everything they can to stop it. Families put a lot of pressures on themselves. As a matter of fact, the reason they're calling me and the addict isn't is because they're closer to the bottom than their loved one is. The goal is to get that family on the same page, set the healthy boundaries necessary, plant that seed of recovery, and let their loved one take accountability. We always want everybody to go, but if we can walk away with that family knowing that they did everything they could, that's what we want to do. I mean, when I went through my intervention, I said no. And if you were to ask my mother today, she would tell you that after 10 years, even though I refused and walked out and and went to the streets, it was the first night of sleep she actually had, because at that point she knew that she had done everything she was supposed to do, and at this point it was my decision and it wasn't her fault.
Is there any follow-up to an intervention?
Family First Intervention offers lifetime consultation, and I think the biggest problem I have with that is most people don't take advantage of it. The families that do take our calls or call us are the ones that continue to follow directions. We have found that when we do follow-ups and the family is not answering or returning our calls, it's usually because they haven't followed through with our advice or the treatment center's advice. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've called a family that's doing everything they're supposed to and they stay engaged, and how many times I've tried to get a hold of a family that doesn't answer a call back, and I come to find out the loved one has left treatment prematurely, is living back at home, and mom is paying all the bills again, thinking that the 3 weeks in treatment was going to fix them, even though they left prematurely. So follow-up is there, and unfortunately the ones that don't partake in it are the ones that need it the most.
Why is an intervention specialist needed? I mean, why not just do it on your own?
Because we're not emotionally attached. You know, I think the biggest thing in answering that question is families think, again, that what are we going to do differently? You know, they think an intervention is about a motivational speech. You know, Dad, what is that guy going to say different to my son that I haven't already said? What is that woman going to say differently to us that we haven't already did? And that's the reason why professionals are needed. I mean, you know, our car breaks down, we call a mechanic. The roof's leaking, we call a roofer. The toilet clogs, we're calling a plumber. We got a son or daughter with a drug addiction, I got it. You know, I never made any sense of that. The intervention is not about talking to the addict or the alcoholic. The reason professionals are brought in is because it's changing the family. I've been doing this a long time, and I've never had a family call me up and say, Mike, we've done everything, including setting healthy boundaries and changing what we were capable of changing, and it still didn't work. No, it's always what we've done to try to convince the person to go. Left scratching our heads, it's because you haven't changed the family. That's why you need a professional. And again, it's like anything else. Most family members aren't doctors, therapists, psychiatrists, or addictions professionals. Therefore, unfortunately, have no business even attempting to try to do this themselves. Professionals are needed to set the boundaries. And you know, the last part would be is that we can establish the connection with your loved one. We know what they're going through on an addiction level. Unfortunately, the family doesn't, and we can establish that connection. And families are usually the ones that are held responsible for the pain the addict or alcoholic is having. In the end, when you, the family, try to confront that addict or alcoholic with their solution, you tell me what's going to happen. That's why they explode. You need a professional. You know, we're not emotionally attached, and we know what we're doing.
If you could let us know how people may contact you if they're interested in your services.
We could be found on the web at Family First being spelled out, intervention.com. Again, familyfirstintervention.com, and you can call our toll-free number, and you can even ask directly for me, Mike Loverde, or one of my counselors on staff. You know, most families that call are located in a different location than we're at, and again, we do service the entire United States. As far as coming to us, you needn't worry. We come to you. Our interventionists come to the family's home, and a lot of times family members are out of state or in different locations, and we usually set it up to where we're traveling to the best location where we can get to the substance abuser. So, you know, any other questions anybody has, they can contact me at familyfirstintervention.com, and I can, you know, go over the process and procedure with them. But, you know, calling in a professional is always your best bet, even if it's just for initial advice. You know, the family picking up the phone and making that first step is what we're wishing the addict or the alcoholic would do, you know, making that first step to ask for help. The reason the family's calling and the addict isn't, again, is because they've taken accountability of the addiction, and that's why it needs to change. So, you know, give us a call if you have questions, and we're there to help.
Again, Mike, I'd like to thank you for your time. And again, Mike Loverde, founder and CEO of Family First Intervention. Thanks, Mike.